whatever it is, wherever you are. Alright, so our new arc got finally published, or manually ended. Unfortunately, it actually broke into three things. So you've got some missing stuff from the ones that were actually put in earlier. And maybe if there's extra time, I'll just combine that. And maybe you could do some code investigation about how the stuff's being logged, trying to figure out why we're getting the extra start times. But right now, you could not link to this because it wouldn't pick the map. So one of the things I want to do is I want to have some sort of like time parameter on that. However, I had tweaked this to try and cache bust it. So I don't really want to necessarily keep that around. I guess I could put some kind of cache bust. Oh, and I did find a bug reference for the one issue with leaflet flickering. But that is going to be a process of figuring out how to build leaflet because I'm normally using a obfuscated version, not obfuscated, compressed version. And it's not obvious how I would make that change in the compressed version because they turned the if into a series of Boolean operators or logical operators, so it's a little more convoluted. Alright, so if I go in here, we're picking an arc, but we're also picking a time. So I actually want to see how this mechanic is working as far as picking this. And see what we need to do to have that be a parameter that we can include here. And I've got a compiler running, right? Yes, alright, so I normally kind of keep that. And then we're going to have to watch for errors. Alright, how are we selecting time? If we say to update our tiles, which is generally from the time playing, this is when we received data and then we want to update based on the time in the data. This has implications for how we pick time as well. So I start up its date now. Okay, so there is a current time message. Arguably, the existing version follows from set view, so we could turn that into one thing, because it is kind of a view. But we have a current time. And then I'm just going to have to watch out for things that can override that. Oop, and that's the compiled version. Where do we... There's lots of URL references. On URL change route. There's something I do to build. Well, we have to build it and we have to respond to it. It's going to be URL something. Or is it going to be a navigation something? Navigation.key, replace URL, push URL. Center URL, which is really... Oh, because the view has to link to it as well. Some of this stuff does kind of need to move around. So this doesn't currently have a time factor to it. Going to the point where it needs a full-on model. And this is where, well, point, I think point is coming from Leaflet. Leaflet itself does not have a concept of time as a coordinate. Yeah, so I've just been using their point. Time dot. Is it POSIX? Where do we do current time? Or is that happening actually in the Leaflet module? Encode.timestamp. Which might be in a whole data thing. Yeah, a timestamp takes a POSIX and well, it's a value though. I like that it's a relatively simple core, so you kind of know what your elements are. I still have to look up a lot of library stuff. Sometimes it feels like a lot of work to get everything to do a feature in, but then you theoretically have sort of everything covered where it's kind of easy to get something to skate by with a very, very simplified version of a feature in JavaScript or something where it's not really a complete loop. For some of the stuff I'm doing, I'm keeping stuff in JavaScript out of concern for performance, like decoding tens of thousands of points. All right, well, I mean, this is Elm. This is some JSON encoding for data, which is one of the things you end up having to do a fair bit of. This is a little bit of an unusual thing because I'm basically doing a companion UI for a leaflet map, where leaflet is a JavaScript-based library. And I'm doing a lot of the like lower level rendering and stuff in that environment. So for the most part, Elm is this side panel over here. And I'm also having it run the URL and many of the data downloads just to kind of keep that model of things. So it's based on modules. I'm currently being somewhat lazy with my modules. I have like one main module and a view module, and then like a couple of other things. Like I like to keep the encoders and decoders as their own thing because I can then scope importing all of the default encoders, decoders. View is kind of its own thing because of importing some of the view library stuff. And then one of the things that has a very consistent model for how you do a web application. You have messages that generally speaking you hook up to library or runtime event triggers. So some of these will come from effectively like button presses or control events, HTTP responses. So everything that sort of happens that's going to update your app is going to come in via one of these messages. So you know that we have a state, a model. I tend to do these very big flat models. I could probably do a little bit more with this as far as structuring it. And this is a complete description of your application state. Now this gets complicated because we have the JavaScript stuff over here. But on this side, everything is described by this model. So we have to initialize that model, and then I don't know if I have any super simple apps. I mean, possibly simpler than this. I'd have to look through my applications to see if any were relatively straightforward. I mean, if you want basic Emling.org, basic. And unfortunately, you know what? I actually did need to get back because somebody said that they were using Firefox and weren't getting the worked up colors. So if you want sort of basic examples, this runs you through. They might get to something closer to a full app by the end of this. So that is a complete example. You have a trivial model, a trivial update, a trivial view. So the model here is just a number. You have an update that can increment and decrement, and a view that just says, okay, we're going to do a div with some plus and minus buttons on it. That is, I mean, you could do something that had no interactivity that would be simpler, but that's about as simple as it gets. Yeah, so messages update the model. That only happens, that's managed by the runtime. Then the view gets called with the updated model, and that has a very direct transformation of the model into the output. I haven't really done Angular. I did one thing with React, and I didn't get deep enough into it to understand how it works. There's a lot of magic going on there in terms of how state gets hooked up to things. Like there's some sort of like, was it a provider or something that has to be enclosing the element, and then that kind of makes things work. So I understand that the React Redux model is kind of inspired by the Elm architecture. So this is like a much more direct and nicer version of that model. Yeah, well, maybe I was trying to use the wrong bits of React. I did try to do some stuff with it. I ran into problems and some of the same problems I run into in Elm. Like if I have a control where I want free text entry, but I'm only interested in numbers, then you have to do this weird thing where you like kind of keep this state aside. That's what the user inputs, so you don't mess with what they input. And then also you have to keep the integer converted version, and then you have like your model, and then there's this like component state. It's in React you can kind of put in the component, and in Elm you really have to put it in the model because that's the only place you can put it. Mobex, okay. Yeah, I know I've been hearing some talk about React hooks. I haven't been back to look at it. Uh, and I'd have to look at those things to comment on them, but I don't know. Elm does not do so good at the component-based thing. It's sort of different than that because everything ultimately has to be brought back into a single model. But then you know where all your state is. Yeah, it's a functional language, so you have the type checking and the no side effects, which is sometimes difficult, but also, once again, clarity. You don't have to wonder what something's, or if something could be having side effects at a distance. I don't know, I'm not convinced it's the be all end all, but looking at a JavaScript world that was moving into having a compiler step, I decided to try something completely different. And Elm seemed to have some people who were interested in liking it, so that's kind of one of the things I picked. Interfaces. Huh. Okay, so well, I mean, so TypeScript will get you a lot of the same benefits you get from Elm's type checking. Prop types is one I don't know. Yeah, I tried one very simple React application. It probably wasn't the best example of it. And kind of tried to take it through some evolutions from just using the barest parts of React to, I think I did a React Redux on that one because that was seemed to be a big thing and more Elm-like. I know some of the conversions were awkward, but maybe it's because I was trying to change from one model to another. Ah. Okay, sorry, wrong operator there. And what I was wondering is if there was, well, this is technically different purposes. Um, that provides a pipeline. I don't necessarily need a full pipeline here. Although maybe it would make sense to have some sort of like URL encoder decoder type thing. Oh, and we have, how about a parameter, huh? And then everything that calls this is going to be off. Ooh, does a model have a concept of its current time? Uh, to retrieve numbers. I don't know. It may have been a bug, but long ago I got burned by using 3 equals, not recognizing that 2 strings, though they were different objects, had the same content. So I've been a little bit down on the 3 equals since then. Maybe that was a bug in some old version of a browser. Let's see. My issue with the number inputs, I don't think it was not using number inputs. It was, well, I mean, it was a little bit. What if you just typed something else? But like if you mistyped, or if you typed something that like if you added a decimal point for doing a float, that the decimal point itself is not a valid number. And if you just took the user input, converted it to a number, and then put that in your model state and looped that back to the page output, you would have an invalid that might turn into a 0 or blank or whatever. And then that would erase the user output, or if like it was one character and that wasn't a valid character, then that just wouldn't be an input, and it found it very frustrating to use. So to get a good user experience out of a program updatable control, I found that I had to keep a string version of the user input and the converted value of that, and then give feedback about whether or not it was valid. Hey, Prison Guard, are you talking about the map? Yeah, we got some rendering going. We just got the data for the last arc. There's a situation there. I may deal with it, I have time, but I'm also kind of waiting to see if I have better information on that. Alright, so do I actually have current time in my model? That might be a small, important detail. And something I'm going to have to talk back from JavaScript about. So we're setting end time, end time. We're updating end time. Do I want that to be end time if we end up animating? No, if you're animating through there, you would not want to fetch and then open up data. You'd not want to fetch the stuff you just looked at. So I'm going to have a separate concept of current time, and when you manipulate the GUI controls, it will probably change that. Also, to maintain the current behavior where that can select times. I think eventually what I want to do is have like a full width like timeline control for doing time stuff, but that's going to be a major project in and of itself. Alright, so we have end time. We can probably reuse this as a field name and as a function. All right, so if we are updating this, then we're updating that. If we're updating this, then we're updating that. If we change server, we have to update the range. We only have to update the current time to the extent, and that actually doesn't, it should probably be in range though. And the arc, if we're updating that, maybe current time, well, because this is the time we're sending. Although this does open up the possibility to do a range check and then send the checked time rather than just the end time. Server list. So we're picking big server 2, updating our time. Wait, no, that's end time. This is not sending time to the map. It's not necessarily doing anything there. Data layer, end time mode. And then there's the play relative to, which I didn't really look at. Alright, so that gets our basic data in place in order to have a current time. Set to URL probably needs a name update. Model.location. Model.location. This is leaflet move end. Okay, update the URL. And that's all we're doing right now. And that will compile. And our window's just a little bit too small to read that. Time equals 0. That's probably not what we want. Do I ever do a time dot now? Only for particular events. Now these could update the current time also when they come back. You know, I didn't have this duplicate anywhere else. Okay. Current time. I'm probably only going to use this at map start. Of course, the map is also capable of picking its time for current time. Play relative to. Well, begin playback is going to imply that. Fetch up to is the data fetch. It's probably going to lead up to something like that. And that's current time, not the current map time. Ooh, so one thing we have to be careful with here is fetching the current time versus restoring state from the URL. Current time, oh. Okay, so we got something here, which is, of course, not going to be an arc time. So right now we always do this. So I need to know where do... Oh. So I need to only send this if the result of pulling this out is not set. Okay, so you do... So I call this coordinate route. Or I could do a maybe thing like this. Well, that's doing all the set view stuff. Oop. Which either set view or don't set view. And this really is kind of its own thing, either set time or don't set time. So I probably need to start thinking about in terms of like a preset route. And then my change route to maybe just ends up, let's see, so this is doing extract preset. Can I abstract over next step? Okay, so the location is the URL. That's the thing we need to parse. That... Okay, location model to blah, blah, blah. So all these functions have the same shape. Of course, if I have to start passing next steps to them, maybe they don't have the same shape. Or maybe the else here is just model command.none. And then I need something that can stream together a bunch of model command no, I do need to streamline the models. I can't just combine those at the end. So that actually turns this just into it's either this or it's command none, the old model, and then some of this stuff turns into the like combine routes or combine route fragments. Or maybe that's even change route too, but so you're gonna need the URL. You're gonna need actually this. This needs the list of things to combine somewhere. We have to have the URL, we have to have the model, we have to have the result. So in an Elm-like system, they like to do what you would think of as self in an object-oriented system as the last argument, so you can pipeline stuff nicely. When your arguments change, like you're having command message, it doesn't work so well. Or I could do a function that operated sort of like that, where you gave it a model and a command none, and then we're just able to pipeline that through all of the little functions. So one model is we do right now we've got URL model and maybe a list of things. The other is that we do like yesterday route, and we come up with some sort of function which then we've got like coordinate route URL model. Well, that just straight up runs. It needs to get the model result from the previous round. So that would make the model command the sort of implicit other argument from that that's going to come from pipelining this in. And then we just go combine route, combine route, combine route. Which would say we would want this to be, so we just curry URL on there. These take a model because combine route doesn't take a URL actually. It's not really threading that through. If it was like a list of functions to apply, then yes. Combine route is going to be streaming model command message to model command message and a function of a model to a model command message. So we've got a route function and we have a model command. So we do something, this is where we do something like this. Where we get where we apply. Wait, you have three, well, that's going to be the thing that does that step, giving me a new model. So we're going to apply our route, which has that built in. Maybe just a 2. to our model already. And then we do model to batching command with the new command. All right, so now we need to pull some bits out of this. If I thought this through more, maybe I could have done a more streamlined version of it. So we have to know if it was this. If it was, then it's that. Else, it is because that's okay. So actually, set yesterday is a model command message. Oh, it doesn't take the URL. So this is like already, well, if the parameter. This is like already a function that fits in there. Well, no, because this is conditional. If the route is that, then we do this. Else, we do that. And then change route to is yesterday route, combine route with coordinate route location. And oh, yesterday route needs the location still. And then we'll have to come back and do the time route to add to this. All right. What's the compiler going to say about this? Did I start writing something and I didn't finish here? Didn't I fix you? Argument is model command message, piping to a function that expects model command message. Yesterday route returns model command message. Combine route with a function and a model command message. Oh, coordinate route location should be a model command message. Expects a model command message. I get my currying backwards? Yesterday, location. Oh, this, so I guess the way to start this out, well, it's a pipeline. It's not quite the same as a combined route. I could do that if I gave it a dummy command none. Unnecessary. But it makes this a very straightforward process. Uh, 0, 1, we actually need to have a map to see that we've actually done that. All right, and then we take, it's gonna be a little bit more like this, just not with as much stuff. Model 2. Oh! That could probably be a separate step here. Like model... Nope. Yes, we don't really know where we are. I haven't done anything with that integrates with that. MT, maybe time. And then what do you... It's not really multifaceted, it's a little bit more like that. So that's not a constant. If it's nothing, if it is something, see, and I don't want to like do a time update every time we parse the URL. Model current time. Now this is actually a little bit of a pipeline here. Well, that's a maybe time. So if it's there, then we can attempt to parse a number, which I always forget if that's string 2 or number 2. This is to from string from to int, string to int. So by itself, we could just do that. Because this is going to be a maybe, so actually this is going to be an and then. And then we know we have a number, so we can map t times 1,000 so it'll be a valid timestamp if indeed it is a thing. But we still have to unwrap it. So I guess I do want a case statement here, just to unwrap it. And then having the value, I could have done the transformations there. But having it as just a value makes it easy to do this and to do leaflet.currentTime. Capital current time. Abstract hash. Maybe and then string to int. Argument is maybe int. Is piping to a function expects maybe string. They are string to maybe int. Map is and then a function of a to maybe b. Oh, wait. I copied a bunch of code that was already doing integer conversion. Query.int. So we don't need to do that. If it's an int, we divide it. All right, now I don't really have anything to track this. But we did attempt to set that. So if we... That did not set a location, though. Oh, because I'm doing other things that... Well, that gave me a... Now, is that's not the right timestamp. I need to have this update properly update that. But I think right now, I'm not actually storing the XY such that I can regenerate coordinates. Not equal. You know what? I probably should do something like this for time. Although I also have to deal with whether this when this sets the URL. Which way did I do the arguments on this model? Although that doesn't really... Well, I mean, it means that we are recording a position with which... That's parsing the route with which we could generate a route. So why? What for? Oh, do I need to no act the clicks on here? It's the filter button. Icon filter. Okay, so map button. On add, on remove, on event, this dot toggle. This is our event handler. There's probably some examples of this. I don't deal with the low-level DOM stuff enough to... bubble. Okay, so that is e.cancel bubble equals true. E.stop propagation. That's a special leaflet event. So they've got a function. Is this exposed in like their utility DOM event? Well, actually, prevent default is what we want. Prevent default takes a e argument. For which we need to actually capture this. Shoot. That was used quite a lot. L.dom event. All right, so just, okay, so that doesn't break that. So we're in here. Okay, so we're not doing anything with that right now. Current time was an existing event. Oh, we're here. Maybe it's when I stopped using a base layer by time. Although this might be the thing I was talking about earlier. Yeah, this is kind of a complicated project. But I mean, you start small and you build up. Pick a problem you're interested in and try to figure stuff out. All right, is that what we get? Oh, I'm not updating my URL at all. Need to work on that. So where we change time, center URL. Map.setView. Well, I mean, I'm still looking up Elm docs and often DOM API docs and and JavaScript docs for like all the particular methods that are on each array and string and whatnot. You'd have to be really intense on something for a while to have all of that stuff memorized. All right, where? Okay, so Elm doesn't really set the position. Yeah, everybody starts from nothing and slowly builds up. Learning how to find information is probably more useful than the information itself in many cases. I mean, not that you can't go faster if you don't have to stop and look things up. So there's something to be said for experience, but it's... technologies are changing, environments are changing. Sometimes you end up with a new language or a new environment and you have to learn it from scratch. So being able to learn is really the important bit, I guess. All right, so change route to... that is responding to a change. We... We update our URL and we get, what's the event? When we get there's all things we can send. A move end. Navigation.replace URL. There's a couple ways to do this. That creates a new state. That's when you clicked on something. The replace URL just updates it in place because we're just kind of moving around. Yeah, it's starting to become misnamed. Alright, so on move end, so unfortunately, and it's gonna, the model is going to have a, model has a point, right? Because we had our whole set view function. Did I like hit caps lock or something? Model, no, we've got a center. So I want to do this every time we update time. Which is not an insignificant number of places. But that is a model state. I could have a function that does similar to this. Update time and update that. Because this is kind of a mouthful. But I'm already going to be updating state. I'm already... to any of those places where we set current time. Okay, that's a response from there, but it still needs to update the URL. And the rest of my update function. Okay, only event you're sending, only event you're sending. You're sending a handful of things. Only event you're sending. And that was the move end we already had. So in most cases, we could have a function that took a time in a model and returned our change URL, well, change URL and change time. So I've got set time. Oh, that actually does all that stuff. Is that what I use for move end? No, this is only a helper for here because you don't want to send it back if it came from leaflet, which is just the whole thing we have to deal with. But if we get a time from leaflet, we still have to update the URL. Well, this says, is it there? And if we assume we've matched that, you could also update the URL. But I don't want to do a replace URL here because we're in the middle of that process. We can't do replace URL in the middle of parsing a URL. That's just going to cause all kinds of circular logic. So I need like two set time functions. This is almost an argument for inlining this back in. Okay, so this had a function because it did things twice. So we could pull you back. This is the specific version for we don't need to update the URL. And then this isn't necessarily going to be associated in that same way. The set phrasing there. And this is the update function itself. You're kind of an update function. You're an update function. And they're set yesterday. Makes these sound like very, very similar things. No, not set time. I want set view. Leaflet set view. Then you can do more. So then this is going to have to be command.batch. All right, that's 2 in from you. Replace URL. So this will still be here because that's a movement update. Navigation key. We're updating our model. And this is going to be, is it model.point? All right, and then everywhere we do leaflet.currentTime. So this is the time route. That's when we leave alone. So we take, let's see, so this is the only thing we're doing here. So we take this and we throw it to set time, time. Wrong button. Oh, there you are, arc.end. So actually, a couple of these didn't necessarily need to do, and then might be a special case there. Okay, so that's when we put it in there. That's the one for the special of the route. And then, what was that? Select server? Current time in range. So that's your model replacement. So that's doing a data fetch, which will sort of do some implicit time updates once the data comes back. So that might be okay. Yep. Command.batch. Okay, so it was not model.point. Center. Okay, so that did update current time from the looks of it, which we need to not necessarily do. Oh no, that's the before. Okay, so I think that's supposed to be updating it. So arc is, and we used to be setting the time there to do the map anyway. There's our various part. Yeah, so that's where some of the missing floors are. And then all the diagonals got put in afterwards. So there actually was no building in our first little time step here. Or there anyway. And then does that time step reload? No. So what is our startup procedure like? We do our initial model. So this needs to be conditional on whether or not time is still equal to this. If it's still there, then we do a fetch. Else, we just do nothing. Because we should have gotten the time out of here. And that already replaced our time. Now if we reload... Okay. So we kept our time, but we didn't send it to the map. This might have happened too early? Or our own set may have... Okay, so we received the message. I think I skipped over the function here. Do we have like a final thing? Well, we've got what we had. Alright, actually this is all based on target layer, right? No, yeah. Oh, okay. So we did call this from somewhere else. But that was the only current time message we got. Now, base layer by time. We select it there, but that is before we set up message responders. So we expect, yeah, this one to be current time. Current time. Ah, arc list. So probably we just don't want to do that. But we didn't have the arc list. That's what we needed to reselect. So either I need to send the time again, or the map needs to also remember the last time. So that it can properly handle that state. Data layer sets it to something appropriate for the data. Focus sets it to that life. Ooh, so that means in the map maybe you need to update the state as well. If we're going through time and updating that, we need to update that. If there's a point overlay, we need to match it. Okay. What do we do with you? Well, I need water, so I will be back in a few minutes. Go there. And we can probably fly down there. Yep. I'm bumping my head against the ceiling so it counts me as walking.
This will take a little bit, but it's important. The base won't function without it. I really do need to make a factory.
Oh, thank you. Thanks, Mom. Okay.
Participated in doing Carrot Farm so far tonight, and a big part of that has been that this game's really goddamn overwhelming, and I just didn't know what I was doing. But there's a lot of... Okay...
Where'd you go? Baby. It doesn't get far without a tit. Right? Don't know if it was hungry or scared. Ooh. Somehow I found I was able to wrap my hair up real quick. I already died by snake, but okay, let's go before another kid pops out. I don't want to disappoint them.
What the hell is going on?
This is the true form of Peen-kun that I pretended I couldn't see.
So,
Peen-kun was always by my side, and because of that, I was able to live out my dream of being a chosen one. I lived as a chosen one alongside the familiar I called a friend.
Then you're saying Peen-kun's real form is...
Yes. Peen-kun is a delusion I myself have created.
Peen-kun is a delusion?
it all makes sense now. It feels natural. Freeing, even.
Peen-kun?
Now that you know, this existence, the one you call Peen-kun, is no longer needed, Saki.
No! Why?
Because you're a chosen one, with or without me. It's your destiny to nullify this unending day. Yet as long as I'm part of that destiny, you'll continue to wander the space between reality and delusion.
And welcome back. So we don't have the information to pick an arc until we get the arc list. But a time gets sent right off the bat. I guess the arc data that updates the arcs. So we do have some kind of global data. Now, at some point, I do kind of need to go back and break this whole thing up into some more modular stuff. It's just, like, I still kind of want to get the time view of the map placements going. And there's just so much stuff to do. So we've got our base layers, we've got our arcs. We'll be able to update our local version of current time. Oh, and then when we're viewing time, we're going to have to update. No. So either... So this is a particular situation right now. Leaflet gets an arc list. Or why just make that a required parameter of arc list? Because it's real easy. I don't know that I would ever do these or one without the other. The other thing I have to consider here is message ordering. Because I think I have found that these are backwards in the past. So for that reason alone, it might be worth combining them. Yeah. So it's like, I can just go reverse the argument order, but I just don't want to have to think about that. That is kind of an error-prone mess. So our list is the main thing here. So we could do the time as like an extra parameter that was just you could create under the function. Or do it after because it's kind of an extra thing hanging on there. All right, so now you need to pass that parameter. And map. Oh, you didn't. Well, I guess the arc layers didn't necessarily have Rift stuff going on. Alright, you are still mad at me. Current time call produces command message. Previous elements in the list. Oh no, that was an intermediate error. Okay, that. So we do send a current time right off. That's almost not useful. Since you expect to get the arc list anyway. And I probably should still do something here just so we have a time. And you really shouldn't be there. All right. We got rid of our console logs, not all of them. Oh, that was from update arc. What did arc list call? Update arcs. There we go. Oh no, it must be base layer by time where it picked. And then we can also go to somewhere else. And we can link to that map. And this is not by any means complete. For instance, if you were, so we do have a time step in here, you might want that to affect the life data you fetch. We might want it to interact with time mode, which is only in life data, but that's a first step. Now, did I have this in my notes? kind of a bit farther down. It just started to bother me. Time, parameter, and URL. Now, there are some issues with this still. For instance, if you were really looking at another server, it would still select this. I don't think that's really different, though. So I also want a server filter in there. But one of the most immediate things right now that I can think of is that when time dimension begin playback, draw tile should have some sort of event handler on it. One of these things. Or maybe it's the anim layer that subscribes to it. Anim overlay on add. Add control, edit directive target on click. Time dimension on time load. Anim overlay update tiles. So that, in that case, we were able to just directly call that function. Now I think I could just subscribe to multiple things there than having a function that does both. I'm actually going to need a new event here, I think. Now, there's probably details in the event here. Eve, ev.time. We're generally talking in different terms here. And I think I lost. So we could just call it time load. That's what it is from a leaflet perspective. .elm. So this is an event from the other side. This feels kind of like that same kind of time update. All right, decode event. Time load. We've got a point decoder. Do I have a decode.timestamp? It's going to want my update function to handle this now. Cannot find the decode.timestamp. I may have not exposed that because I didn't need it before. Indeed. And there's the update function. Move end. Leaflet dot time load. This is just set time model time. Oh no, we set you up to be able to take a model. Oh, but set time sends the time back. We only need to update the URL. Time and model dot center. Now there's nothing that syncs the times up here right now. Oh, actually, I don't have data yet. Oh, and actually the data I do have is probably for a different... Okay, there we go. Do I have this? Yeah. I'm going hitting live server. Which, I mean, I might need a little bit of a data update on this thing, but... Actually, we're... So, my life data fetch is probably not related to this right now. That's something we want to work on. I'm not seeing my... Oh, failure time load. Well, that would be a little bit of a problem. Time load. Yep. Expecting an int. Map decode failure. We probably need to, pull out a field. The point decoder did that for us. Oh, I'm not sure we've recompiled yet. Let's get an object with a field named time. This is where decoders become kind of a pain. Oh, hey, how about we do that? The other thing was just a tag event. Okay, so that's updating the URL. If we actually crossed a boundary... You would then have a link to the new time. But I would have to go back around the beginning of the, well, beginning of the arc or change of an arc. To sort of see that happening interactively. All right, well, that's one step. Now, this doesn't feed back to what data we get. So if we're looking at this map, so right now I've kind of geared this around the end of time. So you'd probably want like data from this arc around the timestamp you were looking at. By what definition of around? Does this even... Well, okay, it's definitely not feeding back into here. But oh no, wait, no, yeah, this is at the end. What would you want current time to turn into? I kind of need to work on this whole process. If you were looking at that time, you'd probably want something around there, which almost suggests sending your end to like this plus something, this plus half the range, or all of the current arc, which won't necessarily work for a super big arc. So what if we went back, I mean, just to be simple about it, if we went back to there, and even started the playback, and then I said, okay, that got that. Then if we fetch data, then we're back in our current arc. So that doesn't feel like reasonable behavior. Overlay add, require recent lives. Yes, this does a very specific thing. Where it just gets the most recent data. Whereas, which is a nice thing to have, just the default load, it's all cached. Oh, but this is actually on the show. Fetch data for time. So I would have to do some detection on getting a time update. And you see, because I've got the modal UI. I don't know that I want that going back and changing the UI. I kind of need to redo time overall. So I'd have to go through the arcs and find the appropriate arc if I wanted to do arc selection, which is reasonable for the smaller ones. Otherwise, we'll just have to do some kind of range around the current point. So that suggests that every time we get a time update, at least from the map, we need to go reset this range. We could try to stay within the current mode. So time load, we'll just do that. We would probably want to make that a function. So this is fetch data for time. This would be time selection for time. So now, do we constantly update that, which is my initial thought, or do we only use this in the case where the data layer wasn't defined? In which case it would kind of it would be a special case of require recent where we have a time defined. But that defining that model would allow us to use fetch data for time. So we still need this as a function. This is still based on current time. So So we'd like to stay in this if possible. So this is a command. This is going to be a model update. So arc range is sort of the easy one. We go through all of the arcs and attempt to find which arc fits the data, if any arc fits the data. Otherwise, we have to change to something else. From now, we need to know if it is within the time before period. Otherwise, we have to change to server range, I guess. So do we have an arc list here? We have arcs. So model.arcs, we need to pick one. Is it list filter? List.filter where arc.start model.current time. Is POSIX comparable? I hope it's comparable. That may or may not have given us a result. But model.current arc is a maybe. But we're only interested in this, in staying in arc mode if it does stay there. So if it is a thing, then we have current arc equals new arc. Else, well, we kind of do this anyway. And model.endtime mode, endtime mode equals server range, and we want to do time selection for time on this modified model so that we redo whatever code we write up here. So this is a relative start time. End time. Hours before. Yeah, so I actually need a... Well, no, relative start time. That's... Model dot end time. Model dot... I actually need like time. So is this even functional? We know when we started the application. Maybe we just don't allow this mode here. Because I don't want to deal with fetching current time. And we fetch our original start time and then do stuff in there. Alright, so this we pretty much just set, and if it falls outside of range, what the heck, how'd you even get there? So we want, and see that's a relative start time. We only have this going one way. So you are going to be the model update that sets end time equal actually we don't even have a relative start time because it's all calculated relative end time model dot current time model dot hours before divided by 2. You might want to set a minimum on that. Any obvious syntax errors? Yes. For some reason I thought this would be a bigger list. You were stored as an integer. Right, we stored it as the actual... We stored that as... What? POSIX int. Maybe it's applying the operator to the wrong thing. You can't compare POSIX values. I guess I could do a let here. Now, didn't I have like a... No, not a clamp. In range. Which actually that sort of is a range. Yep, and then we did all this junk. Oh, and then we did the max min. This returns a POSIX that is in range. It does not test the range. Min I less than or equal to I, and I less than equal to max I. Arc.start, model.current time. Oh, wait, copy the pool. And copy the POSIX. Oh, ARCS is remote data. So I have to deal with that. Well, this only takes effect if we have data. Or if we don't have data, then this goes to nothing. And we do all this. And in any other case, we don't have arcs. Even though it's kind of not necessarily the thing to not ignore your cases, but... there's just multiple cases, and they all come down to we don't have data. I mean, this is probably already true, but it's nothing. Remote data list arc. Oh, we need to use this thing here. Where are we at? Case new arc. Just value, but oh, I forgot to do list.head. Okay, now this is just a function that we want to use. Yeah, I don't want to do this on every set time. Time selection for time is just a model to model. So on time load, or do I only do this when I need to, well, it's required recent lives. If it's not requested, yes. Do we do this anywhere else? When we set yesterday mode. Which could end up being at odds with our time. So we want to set the time selection as such, and then call our other, is it fetch data layer? Fetch data for time. Let's show. So when we turn that on, well, this really this once again depends whether the time is set. So if time is set, we configure our. Oh, shouldn't this be an init thing? If they're viewing data, they've already got data. So this is, we've got this model. After doing the change route to time route, if we got a time update, so the idea being, if I go back to here, and I say load my data, nope. So I set this timestamp, and when we reload, oop. That is still at the end. I might be overwriting that because I did this very, very early when the server comes in. Yeah. So that also depends on whether or not we have a current time. Maybe. What we need to do is actually bound. Well, this would end up putting us that if we bounded the time to the server range, it would end up at the bottom of the range by default. What do I do with you? If current time is still 0, you don't want to take the minimum of them because it's going to be 0. Millions to POSIX. That gives you a default on, okay, we find Big Server 2, get its end time. That's what we use for those two things. Wait. Oh, this is end time. Yeah, if we're updating this, I kind of need to do... Is it end time fine? Or fine end time? Wait, model.end time, course end time. Oh, we actually made, then fine controls that directly. Okay. Model.current time. And this assumes we have a valid time set. It doesn't, there's nothing here that's conditional on having a valid time set. Although, nothing here makes sense if it's 0. More indentation. So then when we get server list, we can set that, and we can do this if we have the time. Needed a then there. Okay, that is a little bit in. But we're still calling require recent lives. So that function should probably still do what it says. Data layer. Loading, loading. Hey, just a data true. But it tells us whether it's there. So we got it back. So this isn't the only place that tests it. Unfortunately, we do this twice here. So this does nothing if it's already there, which is something that we want to do. So we need to abstract what we fetch by default. So require recent lives. So maybe we structure that as a require of the other sort that still does this stuff. Show our select show fetch data for time. It just takes a model. Require recent lives is used in... I thought it was used somewhere else. So we've got require recent lives. We can do Presumably it should be the same as that. And there's a fetch data for time. And then over this we have a which matches that. And says if time dot release deposit 0, then how does require life data? All right, it does not like, I missed an equal sign, one of my favorite typos. Acquire recent lives. Oh. All right, so we've got a timestamp. Oh, that moved us back. I still need to fix that initial setup too. All right, so we're at that time. If we load up in this time, now, that slide doesn't seem to be an arc time. What did we... Okay, so that was a day around. Why did that not get selected as... Oh, because I said maintain current mode, but the default mode is range. Time selection for time. So this, but I can't change mode to switch back then. So this turns into a arc if it's in an arc, and range otherwise. And we don't care what we were. What was it? End time mode. Oh, and there it is. else, we don't have the easy recursion there. And maybe for consistency, that's not handling. Okay, we've got two cases that do that same behavior. So you're going to have similar to this. All right, so you do time selection around, and you do time selection around. Right, that looks like it's actually in a town. Although I guess I do need to actually check the other case. We reload this and pop some data up. Oh, that may have been a URL change, not a full load. So the model still had a time in it. My database might be out of date. Model.currentTime defaults to current time, but that shouldn't be in an arc. Okay, it's not getting the blank as a thing. All right, well, we still got something here. And I've been doing too much code. Fetch life data for current time by default. So what are we doing here? It's hard to get in here. Okay, so this is being called. Right, we fetched the current time. And then by the time we have a parameter, or a server list, so something else is happening to trigger a map update here. Oh, because when we have the arc list, we send current time, don't we? So I kind of need to distinguish between, well, we need our current time if we don't have that set to configure things around. But it's not the same as users set their time. Or, wait a minute. So why was that selecting arc 0 anyway? Wait for it to compile. Why is that putting us into arc mode? It's not going to be equal to 0. So how is that in range? It sounds like it's an unfiltered list. Not compiled yet. Nothing. So time select. Because I copied this. What? What? What did we request here? Oh, I might not have 2 days of data. And it is specifying a time window. Or the most recent 2 days of data. Although I thought... Oh, require recent lives was always doing that. But that was a more lax version. But we fetch the time. So it sounds like current time could be a maybe. But there's the question of, is the time, you know, so to speak, set? And then there is, well, we have a current time. Where we needed to have a time. I keep coming back to, do we even need to fetch this? Well, the problem I've got right now is that we ends up sending that to our map. Oh. Oh, I hadn't reloaded yet. Oh, because I had actually done something here. Which puts us back into the beginning of days. So we do that from set time, the time route. If there is a time. When we set you, when we get our arc list. No, is this, no, so let's select arc. But the arc list always sends it. Because otherwise we can't send the time when we do have it. So I need to separately track whether time was set. And I'm still going to have a current time. So that could be, well, it could be a maybe time, except we actually do have a time even when we don't have a time. But I guess there is the places where we have like map time and our actual current time. Map time may or not be configured. Time zone. And we may also have a time value that we fetch from current time. And we're going to fetch that unconditionally, I think. So all that didn't have any event triggers before. That's not going to set map time. Well, I think we have to treat that as unconfigured is what we're coming to here. So if we change that, that is going to be map time. Map time. If we change those, we update the map time. If we select a server, we want to make sure we are in range. If we do a move end, that becomes a maybe. If we do a time load, that becomes a just. Oh, actually, map time is a maybe. This is kind of a maybe.map. Getting a little bit long. So the URL function should go back to taking a maybe. And we go back to fixing up current. Did I type alias model? Oh, I must have done the init, not the leaflet.arclist. Model dot map time maybe dot with default model dot time. Okay, now this can be a little bit more precise. If model.mapTime is equal to nothing, set time 2. This is the time route. Time selection for time. So this was doing the check. Map time equals nothing. If we don't have a time selection, don't change it. Model.current time is in range. Oh, I should probably, I could move it to adjuster. Because I pulled that out, it's not going to work as nice. Relative end time to model.current time. So if we've gotten down here, it really should be an actual value, but we have to have a default. Yeah, it's leaflet.current time, leaflet.current time, leaflet.current time. Uh, 535. Argument to filter. Start POSIX, maybe bool. Oh. Well, it would make that cleaner if we did that as a case. It'd be an extra indent. Or we just with default into the middle. That's not a good description of what it's actually doing. No, I can't really make a tuple case out of this. Okay, so there's time. I have 28. This is an of. We lost our sub function. Alright, we typoed something here. And these errors are terrible. So it doesn't like something about this structure. I'm not seeing a map time in there. I'm not seeing a current time in there. Oh, map time field is missing. I guess in all of my juggling around, I lost that field. No, this is still the main file. I may have to touch the view as well. Oh, center URL just needs updating. Speaking of updating the view. Oh, hey, look, it's a maybe. Maybe dot map. Can I turn this into... I could turn this into a pipeline? Okay, so url.int time.posix to millis. We're gonna still need a function here. Oh. This whole thing has to be a maybe map. Because it'll all be a maybe at the end. So I want to maybe map over the function that does that. Time value is a POSIX, needs to be a maybe POSIX. Where are we calling that from? Oh, you have a definite time. You have a definite time. And current time should be current arc. So view is probably trying to pass current time. All right, so with nothing, we end up here, which is what the map currently looks like. And that was the thing, one of the things I wanted to look at and didn't have time for, is that sort of initial presentation. But you kind of either need to show something old and say, hey, this is old, or you show the blank and say, hey, this is, we don't know right now. Would you like to see something old? But that is going to have to wait. Separately track whether map time is set. All right, that by itself, I mean, linking to a time is sort of nice. So I can pick any of the maps and link to that. I can, these don't set time. I can go back. Actually, this actually set the time by itself, which is going to be somewhere else. That appears to be a time of bell towns. Now, this isn't going to be the same data. That we need to work on, but it does look like the Ultimate Fashion map. Yeah. We got a slightly different period. And we're actually not displaying the rift right now. Ooh, including there. All right, notes. That's something I need to work on. All right, well, that was, I thought it'd be so simple, like, oh yeah, when you just stir the time and jump to it. There's no data synchronization issues there at all. All right, that is it for now. Thanks for watching. Thanks to everybody who hosted me. Is about when I tend to be on, so I guess I've been going late sometimes lately. Looks like we've got some other JavaScript going on. Our Cooled is doing some event simulator stuff. So if you're looking for someplace cool to hang out, someplace cool to hang out. Thanks for hanging out with me. Goodbye and until next time.